Hey there, friends and enemies. JoPaWrites here again, and today I want to talk about not only this week at Bungie for October 6th, but also the Eager Edge nerf that just dropped this week. A lot of people were talking about on Twitter, and I have my opinions on it, and I wanted to kind of look out in the distance and why I feel like this change might not be what it seems at the first glance. So a lot of people on Twitter and Reddit and the like were upset about this Eager Edge change, which means you can't do a double swipe with the Eager's Edge perk in order to skate faster. Now, Bungie says that was only intended to ever have one Eager Edge proc per swing, essentially, so that way it was basically inadvertent why you were able to do it multiple times. So a lot of, like I said, a lot of people were upset about it, and for me personally, one of the reasons I believe that they're changing this and might reduce skating across all types in general is that Strand is coming, we know that, and they really want to lean into the grapple hook feature that we saw in the Lightfall trailer. So having a basically a unintended act that allows you to skip the parts which might require the Strand grappling hook would be problematic. So that's why I feel like they're changing it. On top of talking about people skipping activities, getting into places that they shouldn't, all that kind of good stuff. So I'm not too pressed about it. I don't use the mechanic myself. Again, it was unintended. So if anytime you see people skating, it's probably unintended. So it's probably going to get fixed eventually. And that shouldn't be surprising to anybody, although it is to a lot of people these days. Anyway, jumping into the TWAB, I wanted to talk about everything coming because this one was very, very juicy. They said online on Twitter that this was going to be pretty much jam-packed, and Hippie did not fail to deliver because this is a banger of a TWAB. Now, they talked about account bans originally. This is very interesting because there was some false bans that happened, if you didn't see, and 60 accounts who were banned unjustly actually had their bans overturned. The fact that it's only 60 is crazy because if you were looking just at Twitter, you would have thought that a ton of people got banned for the wrong reasons. But it seems like, from what they're saying, a lot of people were rightfully banned, but they kind of jumped on board and said they were unjustly banned, like the people that got their accounts back. And now, obviously, they're apologetic. This was a mistake that happened and hopefully doesn't happen again in the future because it would have been frustrating for the people that got banned wrongfully. Understandable. And like I said, this is something that really shouldn't be happening. Although I think some slack is required for Bungie because they have done a fantastic job of fixing the cheater problem, which was rampant for a while on PC, and now it still happens. It'll happen in every major online PvP game. It's just a problem that'll be constantly ongoing at this point, but it's much less prevalent than it was in the past. So they talk about their ban system. Try not to give too much information out, otherwise it'll give away some of their system to cheat developers, which they don't want to do. And the unbans occurred pretty quickly after they first detected the problem. They manually reviewed all the bans and only unbanned those who were wrongfully banned, not the actual cheaters banned during that time. And they have multiple cheat detections that they're advancing and implementing continuously over the course of time, which I think is very, very good. And so the misinformation they talk about is interesting, but hopefully it's something that everyone doesn't just look on Twitter and kind of run with it like they do tend to do, and then everyone's like, oh, everyone's getting banned, everyone's freaking out, when really 60 is such a relatively small number in the grand scheme of things when you talk about how many players actually are in Destiny at any given time. So they're talking about the changes to the design and some answering some questions from to the developers about the various weapons in the game. Talk about full auto trigger. I thought that was interesting. They're replacing full auto trigger on Vigilance Wing, No Time to Explain, and Divinity, I'm sorry, No Time to Explain, Vigilant Swing, and Traveler's Chosen. My apologies. Divinity, they're also nerfing from 30% weakened to 15% weakened. This one was huge on Twitter again for a while, huge in the community in general, and a lot of people were talking about how they could fix Divinity, what they could do. Now, this one I think is good because I don't mind them nerfing Divinity. I wouldn't mind them nerfing well or things that become the dominant single option in endgame PvP content. And I know a lot of people that have problems with that content without these tools will have an issue with it. And that's understandable. But for me personally, I like variety in the meta. I like when things are constantly changing. We constantly have something new and fresh to use, or you can use an off meta loadout and still be successful. So having those options I think is very good. And this is a nerf that going down from 30 to 15, that means you'll have to consider whether the multiplier is worth it. Yes, you'll still be able to land easier crits, but you're not going to get the same weaken effect that you would have otherwise, which I think is good. Going back to the full auto systems up here as well. So Traveler's Chosen is getting surplus. Vigilant Swing will get ensemble, and then No Time getting Feeding Frenzy is kind of crazy, but I think they're nerfing No Time as well, so we don't have to worry about that for too long. So Kinetic Weapons and PvP, they're looking at post Lightfall to make some more interesting aspects to how the weapon feel. This is good because we've seen with Stasis that Kinetic Weapons can be very good with those perks, and the base Kinetic Weapons aren't really as good without any kind of thing. So if they implement more strand weapons and more stasis weapons, those are going to be the go-to, I think, from now on. Now, Adept Raid Weapon viability. As it stands, crafted base raid weapons are flat out better than Adept Raid Weapons. Fixing that in Lightfall, which is good. Again, that's huge because it looks like they're going to make it so the enhanced perks are going to be available, but not full freeform crafting, which I think is important to not prevent too much of a power creep. Making these better than adept versions, better than standard versions is important, but how much better is the tricky situation, especially when you look at things like PvP. So not really looking at adding additional exotic champions perks to weapons at this point, but we will get a new anti-champion functionality with the exotic in Season 19. The Season 19 weapon sounds like it's going to be crazy. A lot of people are talking very highly about it among the developers. So Kingsfall weapons have unorthodox perks pools. The reason being that they want to really give a different perk pool to the trials and raid weapons, which is good. Makes them viable, makes you want to chase them. And I think that's pretty interesting. But they intend their raid origin traits to make raid weapons feel unique. And starting in Season 19 next season, you'll see a small number of non-raid weapons get access to perks from older raids, which I think is a good idea. In my opinion, the stuff should be exclusive to raids for like 6 months, a year, in that range, maybe even a little bit longer, and then start kind of distributing it out to everybody else that doesn't raid among different types of weapons. So I think that's a good idea. So does Outbreak Perfected have persistence? No, it's just a different recoil pattern that's more similar to an auto rifle as it was in Destiny 1. Cold Denial, that Xur Assault with that accuracy masterwork doesn't do anything. Stability works on such a rapid hit, do work on bows. And then adding Headstone, Chill Clip, and Incandescent. They want to do more of that with subclass 3.0 changes, so that's huge, and it's just the beginning, which I love those types of perks. Incandescent, the Volt Shot, all those kind of good things. I really enjoy using those perks with your 3.0 subclasses. So they talk about how they only want certain exotic weapons to tie into the 3.0 subclasses to not make every one of them synergize or feel required to run with the 3.0 subclasses, which I think is kind of smart, but they're looking into the functionality of a bunch of them, starting with those that are themed around the damage type, and then currently looking at I know they mentioned 26 exotics are getting an overhaul. Everything from the Lord of Wolves on to a bunch of other 26 exotics in season 19 are getting changed. So that's going to be a huge and should really shake up the sandbox. Multiple perks in each column on crafted weapons. They say this is hard to do and nothing is going to happen with that in the immediate future. Understandable. I think a lot of times when people are like, just add this, they don't think of the technical aspects, and that's something that you need to try to keep in mind. Now, extra perks, they give a little example on how these extra perks work after you reset in like Vanguard and Crucible, but basically the more as you reset, you're going to have more options. So the maximum perk count increases at first and third resets, and the right column increases in second and fourth. So the left on first and third, so second and fourth. So if you reset 4 times, that's going to be max increase. Max possible is 3 perks in each column. Again, those weapons, especially as non-craftable weapons, I think are really good. When you can have one weapon that has a bunch of different perks to use in PvE, PvP, or with different builds, I think that's huge. Yeah, 26 exotics getting changes from Lord of Wolves to Legend of Acreus next season, which is going to be, I think I can't wait to see these changes. I love a variable meta, and changing that many exotics is definitely going to shake things up. Not all of them are going to bang, but a lot of them are going to be good. So they talk about moving weapons from D1 to D2, and they say this part is especially interesting, reprising the exotic. So they bring over the exotic into D2, and as well as the 6 most popular legendary weapons. And this hasn't come up yet, but in the event that a raid didn't have an exotic, or the exotic has already come back, we get to make new weapons to match the raid. So basically, if Wrath of the Machine comes back and we already have Outbreak perfected, we'll get a brand new exotic instead, which I think could be really cool, especially if it is Siva themed. So talking about the numbers game, why does Adagio hit different on so many weapons? And it really isn't. They say it's just bow or shotgun and then everything else. So Zen Moment actually does, I think a lot of people get confused by perks. So definitely keep that in mind. Accuracy perks on slug shotguns are not really necessary unless you play airborne a lot. And then the numbers on the enhanced perks are listed here for a couple of them, just as examples. So 5 to 10% stronger for enhanced perks in general. Not all of them are actually necessary if you're crafting weapons, so keep that in mind. The intended loop is to pause after engagement to see whether you have another enemy to deal with before reloading. This is going to be the one quiet moment origin trait. And yeah, being caught mid-reload is bad news. So they'll be updating this in season 19. So that's good to update that origin perk. What is the minimum draw time on bows after the recent changes is 500 milliseconds for lightweight and 540 for precision. All right, this is a bunch of stuff with the Australian players. Just kind of going over some of the developers' favorite things. And yeah, what replica weapon would you want? This is where it gets interesting. Season 19 Solar Exotic Weapon. Season 19 Kinetic Exotic Weapon. Season 18 Festival of the Lost Weapon. Okay, so we know we're getting a few different weapons next season to be excited about. That is, I think, really, really cool. So, talking about god rolls here, it looks like they're just kind of going over god rolls. I will maintain personally that rolls are dependent upon feel. Guns in general, weapons in general, are based off of feel. Everybody goes off the god rolls that big time creators like to use, or the god rolls their friends are using, or whatever. But if you don't like that archetype of weapon, if you don't like the god roll of that weapon, say I'm a big fan of Golden Tricorn because it really fits the play style that I like, and I have a nice little loop down in my mind on how to use Golden Tricorn. For some people, it's not a great perk, but for me, it's very good, and I have it procced almost all the time. So for me, I love it, and it's one that I would use constantly, and that's something that I think people need to keep in mind when you're looking for god rolls. Hunt for your god roll, not the one that everybody else thinks is good. Some perks, some barrels, and all that kind of stuff are just significantly better than others, so that's one thing. But if you can't get a kill in the first place, or you have trouble getting a kill in the first place in PvP, for example, kill clip doesn't do you any good. because you're not going to be able to get the first kill to proc it for the second kill. You want something that's going to help you win the first fight, and then you can move on to the next one. So Rangefinder is getting adjusted, which I think is huge. Too many people over-rely on Rangefinder, in my opinion, and they're reducing the aim assist in the mid-season balance pass. So they're fixing Fate of All Fools as well, which looks like it's inconsistent and doesn't proc all the time, so that's good. And you should be more consistent with it in the future. So they talk about the balance changes from last 2 seasons, and they are the future balance changes that we should be looking forward to. Stability bump for auto and trace rifles, small buff to critical hit damage of adaptive frame pulse rifles and precision auto rifles, nerf to effective range of pulse rifles to low to mid stat values. That's important. Nerfs to Jade Rabbit and no time to explain, ease of use. I think that's good because those weapons are pretty dominant right now. Continuation of the Lord of Worlds rework, small rocket launcher blast radius buff, glaive damage resistance nerf, PvP they noted, sidearm aim assist fall off buff, sniper flinch rework, very small tweaks to some machine guns that are outperforming at 10 in range, and then small decrease to high impact scout rifle damage. Outliers that have zoom levels outside normal parameters are being brought back in line. Risk Runner PvP only arc damage resistant reduction still remain ridiculous in PvE. Season 19, we have additional list of changes we'll be making, including removing some shock and randomness, improved hit detection for glaives, reworking, changing nearly 20 weapon perks, reworking, changing over 26 exotics, which I said is 26 at this point. No bloom on trace rifles. Under pressure is not going to be nerfed on fusion rifles. They're just going to adjust main ingredient, which I think is important because to give other fusions a chance to shine. And then precision frame fusions as a subfamily outside of main ingredient is still very strong. Lots of plans to add more subclass verbs to exotics. Nothing concrete, but we're always on the lookout where we can add subclass verbs. We have to be cautious that some of the intrinsic functionality of the verbs may actually be worse than what is on the exotic weapon, or the uptime of a verb on the exotic weapon will cause severe balance issues with subclass interactions. Talking about skill-based matchmaking and everyone's favorite topic. So basically, as they've been looking at it, they've been really balancing heavier towards survival and trials because this is a more competitive game modes with matchmaking that is already almost matched by skill, and now they're going to look at it as again in control as well, but it's basically adjusting so that way as matches are more even, weapon usage of certain types don't skyrocket because that tends to happen when you have matches that are pretty tight all the time and pretty sweaty. So plans for snipers and linear fusion flinch. So they're dramatically increase the time it takes for the reticle to reset back to center after taking damage. So in playtesting, see the market decrease in the amount of time players are able to shoot through flinch, which is important. Greatly decreased PvE flinch to counter this, so snipers won't get nerfed in PvE for that. So it won't prevent trading, but should reduce that a bit. And they're going to look at the same thing for LFRs as well. Special LFRs particularly. They're looking at shotgun changes before adjusting the fusions. They're buffing Headseeker, which is good because it's probably one of the worst perks in the game right now, and it's going to be one of the best neutral perks for pulse rifles going forward, which could be huge. Aggressives do not have high cal baked in. The flinch is from a single shot is proportional to damage, so high damage per bullet weapons will flinch more than low damage per bullet weapons. Dynamic sway seems like one of the most misunderstood perks. Kind of talks about that a little bit. Perk deactivates as soon as you stop firing, so that's interesting. Talks about Bakker's breathing if you're curious about that. And is there a way to estimate how much zoom decreases the effective cone angles? On most weapons, you can divide the base cone angle 3 degrees base divided by 1.5x zoom equals 2 degrees. So interesting, but nothing too crazy there. They are at TwitchCon with their Bungie Foundation. They got a player support. Now, the future of Destiny 2 on Stadia, that's another big topic. They are looking into ways of helping people out with that by January, hopefully. So they're going to keep in touch on that one. They are going to they talk about the new deep side focusing, which is huge. They can talk about tower performance, and then Gear Falcon is being fixed in mid-October, hopefully, which is very, very good. Hopefully that will be reactivated. A bunch of other known issues as well. So yeah, that's it for the TWAB this week. So it was very, very jam-packed, a lot of interesting information. For me personally, I'm excited about a lot of these changes because I do feel like variety is important in the game, and it keeps things fresh. When things get stale, that's when the game becomes boring to me personally. Overall, we'll see how they work, and I can't wait to see more in Season 19. Don't forget, we also get a comp survival rework for PvP in Season 19 as well. So I'm excited about that. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. It helps me out tremendously. And I'd love if you subscribed. It helps me out. And I'll be posting a ton of Destiny content going forward. As always, my name is JoPa. I hope you have a good one, and I'll catch you all later.